If you're a woman in India, well, this whole news cycle has been a trigger. One horrific headline to the other, from Bilkis Bano to now justice for Ankita. The story of Ankita is gruesome. We're talking about a class 12 school going teenager delivering a dying testimony from her hospital bed. How did she get there? She was burnt to death by her stalker, Shahrukh. She said no to him. He wouldn't take no for an answer. So he poured gasoline all over her as she lay asleep in her bed. She came from a poor family, and she has bookended this week that started with our campaign for justice for Bilkis Bano. There is no end, as I said, when it comes to the travesties of justice, the multiple travesties when it comes to women in India. And today we are asking, as Ankita and Bilkis get juxtaposed by our television channels in a framework of competitive politics, we're asking, isn't this a disservice to us as Indian women? For God's sake, spare us the absolute crap about your rape is worse than my rape, your murder is worse than my murder, your party did this and my party did this. Think of this little girl at the age of 50. Ankita, in her teens, is a little girl for me and for so many of us, a class 12 student. Her father didn't have the money to give her treatment in time. Her compensation for this family came after she was dead. He said if it had come earlier, she may have lived. The man on the right frame smiled as he was taken into custody. And our parties are arguing, framing Bilkis against Ankita, as if there is any difference, as if the women's rights are a battlefield for petty politics. Have we, the women, been betrayed by our country's politics and politicians? The question seems almost rhetorical at this moment. Even as I begin to introduce our guest today, is coming another horrific story from Jharkhand about a BJP leader who kept her domestic help in confinement. She's since been suspended. But as I said, there's no end to this news cycle being a trigger for the women of India. Let's introduce our guests on the program today. Four outspoken women, four women who do not pull their punches. And very consciously, I have chosen today to not call politicians from political parties. I'm not anti politics. I've spent my life reporting politics. I believe that the issue of women is deeply political at the heart of it, but that it is getting sullied by petty competitive electoral politics in which I have zero interest, and I'm sure you do too. Introducing our guest today, Neha Singhal. She's a lawyer and a researcher with a special focus on gender and crimes against women issues with the Vidhi Legal Center. Welcome to the program, Neha. I was going to introduce my second guest, but I see I've just lost the internet link to her. So let me introduce Tara Krishnaswamy. Tara Krishnaswamy has advocated relentlessly for political Shakti, for more women in politics. But today I've got to be cynical and ask, while I'm with her on that cause, does it really translate into a more sensitized system? The signs are not promising given the week that we've seen, but yet we must keep marching on. And also joining us is Zainab Sikander. Zainab is a writer and a columnist and often stands out for her refusal to go with the flow of an established narrative. I saw Gargi there, Gargi Roy, political analyst with us. I'm sure she'll rejoin us in a moment from now, so we'll bring her on then. Let me start actually with getting first comments just on what we've seen happen with Ankita. Neha, I'll start with you. School-going girl, right? Burned to death by her stalker, and family's too poor to even treat her on time. The father says maybe if the 10 lakhs had come on time, she might have lived. She's a teenager, and we're still in 2022 having to explain that no means no. And what are people doing? They're saying Ankita versus Bilkis. That's the discourse on our channel. BJP versus Congress, Ankita versus Bilkis. This is what we have reduced the lives of Indian women to. Neha, your thoughts?
I I don't know what to say really. I think what you started with, women's bodies have been a site for petty political discourse and fighting for a very long time. Whatever party is in power, they have some token response to any violent crime that happens against women. But what you said, consent, no means no, is a thing that nobody understands. Our courts don't understand them. Our police doesn't understand them. Consent as an issue is not taken up by the courts. By it's not even a question that is asked. So sure, as people in the world, the people of women of India, we are speaking of consent. It's very important to us, but I don't think the system is recognizing this at all.
Yeah. And, the fact that this man who is charged with doing this, Shah Hussain, he's taken into custody and there's a picture of him and he's smiling. He's
Yes.
actually smiling. And I mean, you don't know what, he's just sauntering there with a kind of normalcy about him and there's his smile. And I don't know. I don't even know what. I mean, it is
Ah,
enough to drive most people to rage, to violent rage. Neha?
I what from my experience of convicts and of people who have been accused of rape and murder, for a while they are very proud of themselves. They're very pleased of what they have managed to do, because this is an object who dared to say no to him, and he has done what is right by him. The system is just the drudgery of the system is going to wipe the smile away in some time. But for now, he seems to be very pleased by what he has done. It's not going to be a pleasant ride for him from here on, but he doesn't seem to know it yet.
And I think again of this school going girl. She's a class 12 student. She's stalked by this man. Her father then cremates her a couple of days later, and he says, if only I had the money before, maybe she would have lived. She's a national cause today, but much like Bilkis Bano before, whose rapists were released in an extraordinary turn of events in an executive decision, this is now down to horrible politics. Those are the men who were convicted for the rape and murder of Bilkis Bano's child,
Wonderful.
being welcomed with garlands and laddus. Zainab, where where is the conversation around women? I'm a proud feminist, and I am looking at our news cycle this past week, and I'm horrified by the news, and I am more horrified by its coverage. I'm almost more horrified by the way these travesties are being framed on primetime television and by our political leaders.
To be honest, I'm right now, I'm feeling so restless and my blood is boiling. But then I know whatever I say today, it's just going to be lost in all the chatter and chaos of, how women are treated. I'll tell you something very small that I remembered. 17th August, the Kerala court actually made a statement which read like sexual harassment case will not prima facie stand if woman was wearing provocative dress. My biggest problem in India is the way we even look at crime against women, be it of a sexual or a non-sexual nature. The problem is the onus always lies on the woman. Where did she go wrong for her to receive this sort of treatment? And as we know, crimes against women are indeed romanticized in mainstream media. If you look at terms like love jihad, also, it is a romanticized term. Why? Because it is a war that is fought over a woman, and if her body is conquered sexually, the man stands as a winner. This is the common discourse right now in our media when it comes to women's crimes being discussed. If you look at this man, Shahrukh, why is he smiling? Deep inside, his sick psychology is saying that he has somehow won at a war, at a game. And if you look at crimes even during riots, and in this case I'll talk about Bilkis Bano, when a woman is raped, it is considered as good as conquering the community, or as good as conquering over ideology that a man stands opposed to. And by raping her or sexually harassing her, he has a step over her. This has been done from time immemorial, but problem is now we are in 2022, and high time India gets its grips over how we are looking at sexual crimes. Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav On that day, we get remission of rapists, something that the central government also said we shouldn't be doing. So why was it done? And why was it not rolled back? We are still not able to feel responsible and embarrassed about the fact that we are still looking at rapists as people who can get reformed, as crimes that are not so bad. They have to be exceptionally gruesome crimes for us to ask for exceptional punishments. Kathua rape case, another rape case where, and I'm not politicizing it, making it about religion, but these are the most horrific examples we have in front of us in the recent past. There were people
and are you struck by how it's been framed both in mainstream media and mainstream politics, Zainab?
Absolutely, because it has become again about Hindu versus Muslim, Congress versus BJP, and the issue isn't who's getting lost in all of this. The woman.
The women.
Exactly.
Nobody actually gives a flying fig, pardon my language, for what's happening to the women, what happens to the families who are left to pick up the broken pieces, the fact that Yaqub and Bilkis today are back in hiding, they are on the go. This is, the fact that Ankita's father, when the politicians walk away and the protesters walk away, will be left to haunted by his child's murder. Before I come to Tara, I just want to play out for our audience. This is the dying declaration given by this school-going girl who identifies her killer, who calls for the worst punishment to be meted out to him. And this is very, very important evidence, but it is chilling that this school-going girl had to make this statement at all. Listen in to Ankita's dying declaration.
तो अपने पापा को बोले, तो पापा उसको बड़े वाले भाई से बात किए। तो पापा क्या, उसके बड़े वाले भाई बोला कि तू अपने बदमाश से सच्चा हमको मारती ही है, ऐसा बोला। फिर हमको धमकी दिया परसों रात को फोन करके 8 बजे कि तुमको मारेंगे हम घर में अपने पापा को 10 बजे रात को आए, पापा को बोले, अब कहले ठीक है सुबह होगा तो देखते हैं। तो सुबह 4 बजे आके खिड़की से पेट्रोल फेंक के और आग जला के भाग गया।
तो पेट्रोल कहाँ पर फेंका गया?
पेट्रोल एक डिब्बा में 2 लड़का था, वो और एक छुटवा था। हम बेटी कौन से देखे।
अब मुस्लिम बहुल क्षेत्र में रहती है
ना, वहाँ पे ज्यादा मुस्लिम है उनको।
नाम क्या उनका?
शाहरुख।
और उसके साथ एक लड़का जो है?
हाँ, छोटू।
और आपको शरीर में कहाँ प्रॉब्लम आया?
सब जगह है, टोटल जगह। मुंह थोड़ा सा छोड़ा है,
बाकी पूरा शरीर में प्रॉब्लम।
She is burned. She comes back home. She tells her father, ये मुझे धमकी दे रहा है. Father says, चलो सुबह देखते हैं, अभी रात है, it's night time. I look at this in the morning, and by the morning his daughter is dead because these two men have come and poured gasoline over her and lit her ablaze while she is asleep. This is a class 12 teenage girl having to give this testimony. Before I come to Tara and Gargi, I'm going to just play out for you what her father said, of course, after it was too late.
हम चाहते हैं सर उसको फांसी की सजा होना चाहिए लड़का को। फांसी भी मेरे लिए कम है। मेरी बेटी तड़प के मरी है, गोदी में रिम्स हॉस्पिटल में तड़प के मरी है। कसम खा गई पापा उसको बचेगा वाली कसम, पापा उसको छोड़िएगा नहीं।
शाहरुख लगातार परेशान करता था।
हाँ, शाहरुख लगातार परेशान करता था।
और रात में बताई थी उस दिन बेटी?
हाँ, जिस दिन घटना हुई 8 बजे उसका मोबाइल में फोन आया था, हम घर आए 10 बजे।
क्या बोली बेटी?
बेटी बोले पापा देखे ना, हमको धमकी दिया कि तुमको जान से मार देंगे। हमने ठीक है बेटा, सुबह में जाकर बात करते हैं उससे हम।
और फिर सुबह
4:30 बजे घटना घट गई।
मेरी बेटी तड़प तड़प के मरी. My daughter died suffering. She was suffering every minute, loosely translated into English. Tara, I want to bring you in. You know, we are all champions for more women in public life, but where are the women in public life? This is all reduced to a game of politics, a game of party A versus party B, religion A versus religion B, this wing versus that wing. Where are the women? Where are the women?
It's impossible to find positivity in what is happening, and in some sense you don't want to look for positivity because you want to fix what's wrong, and what's wrong is so egregious that's really what you want to focus on. That said, it is Lalita Kumar Mangalam and Khushbu of the BJP, 2 women, who said what has happened with the remission of the 11 is unacceptable and they must be sent back where they belong. The men did not get up and say it, they did. So, of course, some man could have gotten up and said it. Um,
I mean,
when we
to be absolutely fair, Devendra Fadnavis did object to the garlanding of the men, not to the actual release, but he did say that. But you're right, Khushbu and Lalita, both of whom I interviewed, were the only two women in the BJP who've spoken. But Tara, is that a silver lining? This is a cabinet with women in unprecedented roles of power. I remember being thrilled when Nirmala Sitaraman, as defense minister, was presiding over a cabinet meeting of the three chiefs. And I was like, wow, we have changed. And then we have these headlines, and it isn't just about the BJP. Women in politics are swept up, I would argue, by the larger culture of patriarchy, either for survival or they're shaped by it in any case.
Barkha, the patriarchy is not gendered. You know that well. Neither is criminality. That's not gendered either. That said, 90% at least of the world's jails are filled with men. Now, in order for us to change this, it is not fair either on the survivors, on the victims, or on those of us that are witnessing it, including the women in power, to evaluate them in a situation where they are surrounded by oppressive patriarchy, where the men call the shots time and again. It is numbers matter in a democracy. In a democracy, we elect people to transfer our will, to transmit our will. Women don't want to be raped. That is our will. And that is what we elect people to transmit. And men don't get it. Perforce don't get it. Every time you even have a banner as a campaigner, every time a banner even says women anywhere, it could be women empowerment, it could be women's right, it could be justice for women, it has a woman's name, you will see that men don't come in the same numbers that they do for other protests, for a pothole protest, for example. So the fact is that we live in a male dominated world and women's responses are calibrated to that. That doesn't make it all right, but the fact is you're measuring it under these circumstances. When you have a majority of women, and this is not just coming from me, during the Bihar elections, when Shakti ran a campaign, one of the MLCs, BJP MLCs from Bihar, she said this on screen. She said, in a public event, Shakti event, she said that, all the women elected representatives in Bihar, the MLAs and MLCs, the female MLAs and MLCs banded together one day and decided to raise the series of rapes and child molestations that were happening in Bihar in the assembly. And when they did, and remember, they are a minority, right? They are less than about 15, they were less than about 15%. Yeah. And when they raised it, the assembly laughed. The assembly of men laughed at them. They're raising child molestations and asking for action to be taken, urging the government to do something about it. And the assembly of men laughed at them. This is the situation when you are 15% women. If you are 50% women, we've got to ask ourselves if more women would not have the guts to raise this and whether men would have the guts to laugh, when would have the guts to trivialize this. If every single assembly and parliament in the country were to have 50% women, the nature of the conversations, the tone and tenor of those conversations is allowed to change, has an opportunity to change. It is not guaranteed the next day things will change magically, right? But the road there has to be paved with enough women that we are emboldened to bring up issues that we would otherwise hesitate to bring up. Tomorrow, when I go, after hearing all this news, if I go in an auto rickshaw, if I find a taxi driver who is borderline misbehaving, that I'm suspicious, I wonder today, we all do, I bet the women here wonder if we go too far in chastising him, if he's going to come back at us with acid, or if he's going to come. That's crossed our minds, right? That's crossed all our minds. The retribution has crossed our minds because these are hate crimes against women. I think the fact that we have crimes against SCSTs classified as that, but we don't have hate crimes against, a category called hate crimes against women, I think is a huge negative.
What mystifies me, Gargi, is why these are not the issues on which governments are voted in and governments are voted out. And that is why maybe I'm just getting older, I'm getting cynical. I will always support Tara's campaign to have more women in politics. But, I've been a reporter ever since the talk about women's reservation or affirmative representation for women began, I have seen that legislation being buried. I am questioning today, really, would more women at the helm of power mean a more sensitive response? Because if it did, there are really a whole number of already powerful women numerically. Yes, Tara makes the important point that there are not so many, but there are still many, many. Gargi, if you're with us and we haven't lost you, let's bring you in.
Yeah,
Gargi,
yeah,
are you
yeah.
there?
My internet connection is really bad today. Yeah, it's been troubling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I with you?
Yeah.
Barkha, you can
Kind
hear me
of.
and see me because
Yeah.
my video is
Go
getting
ahead.
very difficult. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My audio is fine. Yeah, just as Zainab said, you also said now that no means no, women's consent. You know, the thing is, our men are not sensitized like that. The patriarchal, misogynistic mindset is such, and that has been normalized in popular culture. Say in films and all, you will find the woman saying no, and the man is doing if teasing, and there it has been so much normalized that if a woman says no, they think that it is yes. So that is a problem with popular culture also, and here also the administration was equally responsible. The police complaint was made. The police did not act. They called two families.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in there. I'm going to jump in there because we can kind of make out only every fourth word of what you're saying. So we're going to ask you to reconnect. But I think you make the important point of the cultural normalization, and this started with in the films. This started with the teasing suitor, the suitor who actually thought that in the no was hidden a yes, because how could anyone possibly be saying no to us? Now, barely are we processing what's happened with Ankita, and comes this horrible. I'm kind of laughing in exasperation, in cynicism. This is the story of a woman called Seema Patra. And let me first introduce you to Seema Patra. Who is Seema Patra? We can play her pictures now. Seema Patra is a member of the National Working Committee of Women with the BJP. So she held a position. She's now been suspended in the sort of women's wing of the BJP. And today comes the news that she and her family have been keeping their domestic help, another woman, Sunita, in confinement for several years. They've beaten her, they've tortured her. She wasn't allowed to go out of the house for 8 years. She was finally rescued by the son. This is what the local press is reporting, by the son of Seema Patra, who then managed to get Sunita to a hospital. Seema Patra of the BJP works with women, stands for women, and this is how she tortured another woman. I'm just going to play out for you the testimony now. This was filmed by a local journalist, Akshay Kumar Jha, with a local channel called Newswing Ranchi. Listen in.
हाँ लोहा का उससे मारा
अरे
पूरा उठना ठीक थे जानते भी है उसी की वजह से मैं जिंदा हूँ।
आसमान रे की वजह से ना हमको पता है आसमान रे हमको बोलते थे
ठीक ना तुम सही हो जाएगी तुम एकदम सही होगी ठीक ना ये देख रहे दीदी लोग को वैसे हो जाएगी तुम है ना
हम चाहते हैं जो ठीक हुए ना अब आगे और पढ़ना चाहिए
एकदम एकदम हम लोग पढ़ाएंगे बेटा हम लोग पढ़ाएंगे बाबू
जानते हैं जब पढ़ाने गई ना तो वो जो बेटा है उसको मारती थी
आपको उसका बेल्ट था ना
हाँ और इजू ना फोटो और करती थी ना
हमको कलछी से मारी है वही मारी मैडम सीमा पता है
और जानते हैं भी जो गरम तवा चला मारी
कोई नहीं सुन सब ठीक हो जाएगा तू हिम्मत रखना ठीक है हम लोग हैं
तुमको निकालने के चक्कर में वो फंस गए और लेकिन अब तुमको निकाल लिया तो उनको भी निकाल
अब उनको भी निकालेंगे हमका दोस्त है कॉलेज के
अच्छा
बास्की नाम बास्की
ओ आप
अरे नहीं बाबू तो ठीक हो जाएगी।
She is saying that she was tortured with hot stones, hot stoves and iron rods, beaten by her her employer, Seema Patra, who works in the National Committee for Women in the BJP, that has since suspended her. The police are about to arrest Miss Patra. And what does this young woman say? जब मैं ठीक हो जाऊंगी, मुझे पढ़ना है. When I get okay, I want to study. She's rescued, by the way, by the son of Seema Patra, and she names him Ayushman. Neha? I mean, I don't know. I sometimes feel I've seen everything, and then I see something that leaves me so speechless. I want to get into the screen and hold her, and literally, I want to weep, and I feel like I don't even know. I don't have civil words for what I feel like doing.
I haven't seen this, so this is it's very shocking and horrifying. I don't. These are people not seeing other people as human beings. What is like? You do, this is worse than what one does to an animal. This is just not treating somebody like a human. This is a woman of a lower class. This person is an invisible person. She doesn't exist. So being of a woman's wing is of no consequence. A woman of a lower caste just doesn't exist. What does a system does nothing for these people. This is one odd case where somebody has been rescued. It's been picked up by the media. Maybe she'll get some help. Maybe she'll get some treatment. But these stories are rampant. I in my Delhi neighborhood have seen something like this happen, where my neighbor's help jumped out of a second floor, broke her leg because when her employers weren't around, and they used to live right next to us. We never knew. She complained against her mistress, the employer. What can one say? These cases don't even make it to the system. The police, when they came to get the girl back to the employer, because the only people who are being heard by the police are people of our class. People of lower classes don't even get heard. They don't even get their FIRs registered. So how do we get justice for people who are invisible? I don't know. They just don't exist.
Yeah. Tara, you're right. I also wasn't fully prepared for how this video would make me feel, and this whole show needs a trigger warning. And I'm sorry for everybody who's feeling so uncomfortable, but then think of the women who are living it. Think of the teenage girl who's giving the dying testimony. Think of the lady strapped to a hospital bed, a tribal woman who was kept in confinement. Gargi, are you trying to come in? I'm not sure about your connection. Let me just bring in Tara, and I'll try you again after that. Tara and Zainab, and then I'll come back to Gargi. Yeah, hang on. Hang on, Gargi. Yeah, Tara.
Barkha, we tend to look at this through a singular lens of gender, but the fact is, in India and in many places in the world, much of this is intersectional, right? There is, as Neha has pointed out, there is a caste issue here. There is probably an Adivasi tribal kind of an issue as well. And as Ambedkar rightly pointed out, social, economic, and political are three legs of this stool. And in India, we have political democracy. We don't have equality, or justice, either socially or economically. We have humongous differentials. We have a graded system of society, and we have an ungraded large differential between the haves and the have-nots economically, both by gender and by caste. So if we try to look at some of these through a singular lens, it fails by just looking at her as a woman mistreating a woman. There is more to it. There is a caste angle to it. There is a Adivasi tribal angle to it. And similarly, when they head to justice, the kind of response unfortunately, that we saw in India for the Nirbhaya case, or the case from one of the cases from Hyderabad recently, where there was an encounter. The public response is not the response we have seen in many cases. We know that in India, women are ill-treated, tortured, raped, sexually molested day in and day out. And every case doesn't receive the same coverage. Even every case within a city where media is present and local doesn't receive the same coverage.
Yeah.
But we must also say in the same breath that in 2012, after all the protests, the Justice Verma Committee was constituted. Today, we have no such thing yet having been constituted for any of these cases, even those that have happened in the past several years after we have lost powerful women in power. The Justice Verma Committee was not constituted by the court. It was constituted by the Government of India through an order, at the end of which we had significant revisions to the rape laws. Not everything that we'd have liked to see, but it moved huge steps forward. These are important changes that have happened. The law, of course, will not prevent rape. That is for society to do, and the justice system, the process, the due process of law to do, not the law itself, not the legislation itself,
but
which we know is out of reach for a lot of the people in India.
No, of course. Caste, one of the first stories I ever reported was the story of Bhavri Devi, a Dalit woman who was gang raped in Rajasthan for trying to stop a child marriage. And among the rapists was the father of the 1-year-old baby who was being married off. From the Bhavri Devi case, the story of this poor Dalit woman in Rajasthan, we got the Vishakha guidelines, which protect urban women like you and me today. So it's very, very important to bow our head to women who cannot intuitively have the resources to fight, and yet fight they do. They give dying testimonies. Schoolgirls, they call out their killers. They speak, as Sunita does, of wanting to study. Zainab and Gargi, let me just bring you in. Zainab.
That video is really tough to watch, and to be honest, sitting here and talking about women's rights, I feel a bit hypocritical because the privilege that we have, I have the internet and I have the reach, and I just feel so wrong because I don't know, it's just unfair to a level where we can't even sort of make remedies, but yes, we can't stop the good fight. Okay. India is riddled with so many social issues, that start with religion, go to social class, economic class, then go to caste. In that caste, there are subcastes. And when you mix all of them together, justice feels very partial. Very partial. Like Tara just said, nobody is equal actually in this country. And then if you were to look at women as a demography, my God, the amount of this subtext and context in which we have to look at things, it just muddles everything up. But the bottom line is that women need to speak for women. Nobody is speaking for us. This is what I've realized. And I do agree that when there is a crime against a woman which has been done by a woman, that is when things get really worse. Like, for example, this lady from the Bharatiya Janata Party, she's written Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. What is all this for? Are we just doing lip service to become famous, come into politics? Because that's what it seems like. When these slogans made by the central government, when something like Ujala, made by the Ujjwala Yojana, made by the central government, what is the point of all of these things? The point is empowerment. But then the government needs to put it into action by making examples of these kind of women.
But I'm reminded, Zainab, sorry Gargi, I'm making you wait. I'm reminded when I was reporting the protests after the gang rape of Jyoti. I call her Jyoti because her mother Asha Devi calls her Jyoti, but we all call her Nirbhaya. I remember at that time being struck by the fact that the Chief Minister of Delhi was a woman, Sheila Dikshit. The most powerful political woman in the country was Sonia Gandhi. So just like today, you look at these slogans and they ring hollow. That time too, and Tara, I come back to that jaded quality that I'm feeling today. That what's going on? Like we need power for change, but is power enough by itself? Gargi, I know you've been waiting a long time. I hope to hell your internet is working.
Yeah, now at least it is working. So as you said, that women in politics, will it change absolutely the scenario? I really don't think so, because the patriarchal mindset does not only belong to the men, women also have it. I'll give example. Say Mamata Banerjee, she does her politics very well. She has a selective outreach. When the Hashkhali rape happened, there was a 14-year girl was gang raped. She went back home. She was burnt, Barkha. And what did the chief minister, woman chief minister, say? Because the person accused was from her party, son of a TMC leader. So to save that guy, Mamata Banerjee said maybe the girl was pregnant. Maybe that 14-year girl was having a love affair. So this kind of politics, I think women or men, they have to rise above politics when it comes to crime against women. Don't do your politics. Mamata Banerjee should have done this politics to save her people. And it happens in West Bengal, the kind of rapes that we have witnessed last year after the post-poll violence. If you know, I have interviewed women, Barkha, who have fled from villages. The TMC men were raping women at gunpoint in front of husband and children. They could not lodge a complaint in the police station because TMC party people were sitting in the police station. What did Mamata Banerjee do? So women in politics, if they come, they have to be such broad-hearted. They have to rise above politics when it comes to crime against women. You cannot do your petty politics when it is crime against women. But unfortunately, that does not happen in politics. They do selective outrage. Mamata Banerjee will only raise her voice when it suits her politics. So he will go to Hathras. But talk about Ankita, talk about all those women who have been raped after the election. Talk about the girl in Hathras, in Hashkali, who was also burned. You must be knowing a 14-year-old girl, the kind of comment she made. Atrocious. So women in politics must rise above politics.
That's an interesting sentence. Women in politics must rise above politics, by which you mean rise above affiliations of party politics. Of course, gender is a deeply political issue at its core, but I agree with you, by the way, Gargi. I opened this program by saying that I can't bear actually to watch the mainstream media framing, calling political party representatives and making them fight with each other, treating the tragedies and injustices against women as yet another transactional sort of tool to create false debates and shouting matches. But let me just get last comments here. Gargi makes the important point about selective outrage. I made the point about competitive petty politics. I want to start taking last comments from Neha, Zainab, and Tara, and Gargi also, if her internet gets better. Gargi, sorry, you're having a terrible day with the internet. Neha, let's start with you.
I want to respond to what Tara said earlier about the Justice Verma Committee and it right after Nirbhaya incident. What I find is that a lot of law gets written, and it has been how many 10 years since the Justice Verma Committee. Those laws, those issues that came up that was added to the Indian Penal Code, they don't make it to the court. The provisions of law that were being utilized earlier before 2012 are the same provisions of law that are being utilized today. The courts are still looking at the issue of rape the same way that they were looking at it prior. This hasn't resulted in change on the ground at all, as per my research. So I think maybe even for us, we should start looking for things beyond change in law, because change in law will only do that much. We need to, I think outrage is not sufficient. We need to figure out structurally what needs to change for things to actually mean different, like be different.
That's such an important point, because there's an outrage fatigue that happens. What starts happening, Zainab, is when something is too disturbing, the human instinct begins. You see, you're either pulled in by something that's shocking, or you just want to close your eyes and you want to look away. You withdraw. It's too much. Right. There's a too muchness. And so many women say, this is happening every 5 minutes in this country. I can't respond every time. And I think Neha makes the important point. Outrage is not sufficient. The law is not sufficient. Gargi makes the point that more women in politics is not necessarily sufficient. Tara, I know, disagrees. But Zainab, let's get your thought.
I always say this. I think when it comes to crimes against women, the punitive measures that are taken against the convicts, the accused, should be made an exception of. I really believe, I'm not backed by data, but I really believe that if the punishments are in equivalence to the crime and the brutality against women, I think it will deter future crimes. This is what I've always felt. And I do believe that women representation will change the conversation policy-wise. Like Tara just said, that in terms of how we make policies for women will change when women make it. Most of the time it is panels full of men who are talking about women. And I think we've done enough of that. And there has to be more representation of women so that we talk about women. We are always judged to be sanskari, non-sanskari, and based on that, whether we deserve, nice behavior with us. In fact, that BJP minister had said when Bilkis Bano's rapists were let go, he said that those were all sanskari Brahmin
Yes, he
men.
said it to
What
us.
does
He said it to us. He said
he
it to
said it
he said
to
it to he said it
exactly
to us. And I was thinking of that panel. It was dominated by men.
exactly.
I'm not saying that had it had 11 women instead of 11 men, the panel that recommended the release, but that man's the BJP MLA sitting there and saying, "वो तो बड़े अच्छे आदमी हैं, तो Brahmin हैं."
They were Brahmin sanskari. So,
Right.
आपका मतलब क्या है उससे? And I even believe in another thing which Gargi ji said, that even the women are tone deaf. So overall, it is the conditioning. It is how we raise our daughters, how we raise our sons, what expectations we have from one to the other. It literally needs a societal change. So, but the conversation begins how? What we are talking, when this will be aired, the movies that we are watching, the music videos we are watching, the way women are even referred to. In a parliament, when a Renuka ji laughs and the prime minister says कि रामायण के बाद ये हंसी हमें बहुत देर के बाद सुनी है, or for example a didi, oh didi, I just feel we need to start objecting to any misbehavior with women, because the minute I would say
yeah, sorry, I just say that what's really tough is that women also object basis women they like or don't like, or
yes,
relate to or
I
don't
agree.
relate to.
I
And that
absolutely agree.
and so whoever we disagree with, however much we may disagree with them, we need to stand up and say that language isn't kosher for Renuka, it isn't kosher for Smriti, it isn't kosher for
Correct.
Nirmala. I remember writing a whole piece when Nirmala's husband did a very different take on the budget from her, and everybody went after Nirmala, and I said, come on, I mean, it's 2000 and whatever it was, 20, she's not answerable for her husband. You're actually making her account for what her husband thinks. I mean, it's absurd. Now I just want to, Zainab, you've reminded us, and I want to play out again what that BJP MLA said to Mojo's story, and the normalcy with which he said it. It's the same normalcy with which a Shah Rukh Hussain smiles after killing this woman. Please listen in, and then Gargi and Tara can have the last words.
क्राइम किया कि नहीं किया हमको पता नहीं है, लेकिन क्राइम के बारे में मैं क्या कोई इंटेंशन भी हो सकता है ना, कि जो भूतकाल की जो कार्यवाही है उसके फैमिली के मेंबर के जो कोई एक्टिविटी है वो बहुत अच्छी थी, ब्राह्मण लोग थे, और वैसे भी ब्राह्मण के जो कुछ है उसके संस्कार भी बड़ा अच्छा था, इसलिए किसी को मतलब के गुने में डाल के उसको पनिशमेंट करने का बद इरादा भी हो सकता है.
So he's this guy who's on the panel that recommends the release of Bilkis Banu's rapist, is calling these men sanskari, Brahmin. He's even questioning the guilt, even though that's why Neha says the law is not enough. The Supreme Court gave the compensation. He's questioning, pata nahi unhone kiya, nahi kiya, kya pata. Gargi, last thoughts. Anything to be hopeful of?
See, I think this man, he comes from I don't know, should I call it a rustic background or some background, so that kind of a mindset that only he has reflected, which is very unfortunate. I think people from BJP also have spoken against it, whether it is Khushbu or Devendra Fadnavis. In your previous show, I have said that it was really obscene to girl and those. Remission can be a legal issue. It is absolutely immoral. But coming to this, yes, we need strict laws, but only laws cannot stop rape. That I think I'm quite sure, because people, when they commit rape, they don't remember the laws. So laws we need strict. We need fast track courts. We cannot keep on having rape cases going on for years and years. That should not happen. But at the same time, I think sensitizing both our men and women, our police force also needs to be sensitized, which they are not. They ask the kind of questions. And police force, because I have Barkha, I have a problem with it. If you know about it, that when you go for a complaint about molestation also, the police force will tell you, the police station tells you this is not in our jurisdiction. कौन से jurisdiction से say? This was a very personal experience. I don't want to discuss it. So the police force is not sensitized enough. So it is very much about nowadays with social media, with television, with films, you have to sensitize both our men and women. And whether it is Bollywood, whether it is the music videos, they have to be responsible also. One has to stop the objectification of women. Right. And showing it is very natural. If teasing is natural, you have to go after 4 times, then she will just smile. And this kind of attitude has to go, whether in popular culture and in society. Along with that, strict law. Only law.
I think we agree. Only law is not enough. I do want to go to Tara. Zainab, you have a 5-second intervention. Yeah, Zainab.
just want to tell you how we even refer to women in the highest public offices. Our president is chosen, Draupadi Murmu ji, and what does Adhir Ranjan Roy has the guts to say? Rashtrapatni. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the minute a woman points out that how dare you even think you can say this, women, you're difficult. You're being difficult. You're playing the woman card. You're playing the victim card.
Yeah.
This is what we need to change the
Well,
mindset.
how? Like I said, this whole week has been a trigger for women, not just these horrific videos we've seen today. Tara, you remain hopeful. Of all of us today, you remain hopeful. Of course, the fight will continue. The good fight will continue. We'll continue to say we want more women. Power. There is no change without power. So we need women in power, in political power, in public policy power. But when you see what you've done, seen what you've seen this past week, let me give you the closing word, Tara.
You see, when Kamala Harris took office, I had written for Reuters that every single thing she does is going to be scrutinized to the point that what she does doesn't just reflect on her. What she does doesn't just reflect on the party, it will reflect on womankind. And that is exactly what we are doing by pulling out a Mamta, by pulling out a Smriti Irani or a Nirmala Sitharaman for not having behaved a certain way or having behaved a certain way. Of course, there are elected representatives. We must hold them accountable, ask them the difficult questions. And I'm ashamed that, these women have not spoken up, be it for Bilkis or anyone else. But the point is that if you are to judge male politicians by the same yardstick, mankind can never run any democracy, doesn't even have the right to stand for elections, because men have never done the right thing with respect to this. That is why we are where we are. Neither their social, nor their economic, nor their political behavior agrees with the tenets of the Constitution. They violate the tenets day in and day out, and it does not reflect on mankind. It only reflects on the individual or on the party. So what we are arguing for, what we are campaigning for, and what we are sort of advocating for is to say we must have more women, and that is the necessary condition. It is not the sufficient condition. A sufficient condition is an actually equal, a fraternal, and a just society, an equal, fraternal, and a just economic situation, social situation, and political situation in society. What we want is, a proportional representation of women as much as we have in society, in politics, so that women's viewpoints, women's lived experiences can more freely flow forward, which is necessary for democracy.
I think you make a very critical point that when you isolate the behavior of women in a way that you never isolate the behavior of men, you are using it almost as an excuse to argue against more women in positions of power. And I take that point. I do have to close. I will say the bottom line for me is, if you can't feel rage and revulsion at what has been inflicted on Ankita, Bilkis, and Sunita, if you feel the need to but, what if, what about any of these conversations, then actually you don't care about women. You care about your votes, you care about your ideology, you're playing to your constituency, you don't care about women. And more women and men need to have conversations that are not what if, what about it, and caveated. Because there is no Ankita versus Sunita versus Bilkis. There's no verses here. So please stop putting up artificial barriers between women. We have enough to fight in any case. Thank you very much, Tara, Zainab, Gargi, and Neha. And to our audience, see you tomorrow. Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.